Inside, he spotted Robert's glasses lying on the floor. Then he spotted his body, and police were called and they found Robert's wife, Dawn, clutching two of her daughters, 8-year-old Janelle and 6-year-old Jolene. Hello and welcome, my name is Gabby and today's video is about a multiple murder that took place on prom night of 1989. This is the case of Jeff Pelley. On the morning of Sunday, 30th of April 1989, the congregation of the Olive Branch Church in Lakeville, Indiana, arrived at their place of worship for their Sunday service. Their pastor, Reverend Robert Pelley, however, did not. Neither did his family. Understandably concerned, one of the parishioners went to the parsonage next to the church to check on the Pelleys at around 9:30 a.m. When no one answered the door, he was sufficiently worried to find a spare key and enter the home. Inside, he spotted Robert's glasses lying on the floor. Then he spotted his body, and police were called and they found Robert's wife, Dawn, clutching two of her daughters, 8-year-old Janelle and 6-year-old Jolene. All three were dead. As Indiana State Police Detective Mark Center later described, "No one should have seen what we saw that morning. It did not look like a burglary, it did not look like a home invasion. As a detective, I saw the worst of the worst that morning, but we had a job to do." All four of the victims had been killed with a shotgun. The one belonging to the Pelleys was missing from its rack and was nowhere to be found. Also absent from the home were the three remaining members of the household: 17-year-old Jeff, 14-year-old Jackie, and 9-year-old Jessica. Locating them briefly took priority, but all three were quickly found alive and well. Jeff had gone to prom and slept at a friend's house, Jackie had been out of town visiting an older friend at college, and Jessica had been at a sleepover. The two girls weren't under any suspicion, but Jeff, who was known to be angry with his father, was. Robert Jeffrey Pelley was born on the 10th of December 1971 to Robert and Ava Pelley. His younger sister Jackie was born in 1975. In 1980, the family moved to Cape Coral, Florida, and in 1984, Ava was diagnosed with skin cancer. She refused treatment and died in February of 1985. Within months of his wife's death, Robert met 27-year-old widow Dawn Huber. A whirlwind romance ensued, and the two married in November that same year. So quickly that Jeff, Jackie, and Dawn's three daughters, Jessica, Janelle, and Jolene, didn't even have a chance to meet each other until after the wedding. In 1985, the newly blended family moved to Lakeville, Indiana, where Robert led the Olive Branch Church's congregation of up to 50 parishioners. However, behind closed doors, things were less than harmonious. Jackie disagreed with the old-fashioned way that Dawn was raising her daughters, and Robert was a strict disciplinary who expected the children to meet his standards of what perfect preacher kids should be like, and employed corporal punishment when they didn't. He and Jeff are known to have literally come to blows at least once. In early 1989, Jeff was arrested for stealing CDs and cash from a neighbouring house. Robert's response was to ground him and ban him from going to prom or to any related activities. He went so far as to disable the engine on Jeff's car to prevent him from going without permission. Prom night was on Saturday, the 29th of April 1989. That evening, a number of the other high school seniors stopped by the Pelley house on their way to prom to show off their clothes. One of them, a classmate of Jeff's named Kim Oldenburg, later testified that there had been a great deal of tension in the Pelley home and that Jeff had been angry and sullen. However, Jeff later called his girlfriend Darla to let her know that his father had a last-minute change of heart and had given him permission to go to prom. He picked her up at around 5:30 p.m, went out for a celebratory dinner and went to prom. After the dance was over, they went bowling with other seniors and then spent the night at Kim's as she'd organised a post-prom slumber party. In the morning, Jeff went with his girlfriend and classmates on an organised and school-sponsored trip to Six Flags Great America Amusement Park, which is where the police tracked him down. While at the amusement park and prior to the police's arrival, he'd told Darla that he had a strange feeling something bad had happened at home. Jeff was quickly considered a suspect. It was known that he'd been angry with his father, and his claim that Robert had changed his mind was considered highly doubtful. being both out of character for Robert and contradicting what he'd said to others regarding Jeff's punishment. However, there was little in the way of evidence. There was no murder weapon, no forensic evidence, and no eyewitnesses. All there was to go on was the fact that Jeff had a motive, a timeline of events that gave him a narrow window of opportunity in which to commit the murders, and assorted of other circumstantial evidence. The timeline was as follows. The Pelleys had had visitors until shortly before 5 p.m. Neighbours had noticed that Jeff's 1984 grey Ford Mustang was gone by 5:30, which was about the time that he'd picked up Darla. Meanwhile, Crystal Easterday, another classmate of Jeff's, was expecting the Pelleys to call at her house, but they never showed up. Around 5:45 p.m, she and her date decided to stop by the Pelley home on their way to dinner, but found that the house was locked up and all the curtains and blinds were closed, despite it still being daylight and all the cars other than Jeff's still being at the property. This seemed odd to her, but didn't give it a second thought. At around 6 p.m, one of the Pelley's neighbours was mowing his lawn when he also noticed the closed curtains and lack of signs of life in the Pelley house, which also struck him as unusual. He later noticed that the basement light was still on after 9 p.m. At the dance, Jeff asked Crystal if his parents had visited her. She said that they hadn't and that she'd stopped by his home and found it locked up. All in all, there was a window of roughly 45 minutes in which the murders could have taken place. The Assistant District Attorney for St. Joseph's County, Frank Schaffer, stated that it was a very, very small window when the family could have been murdered, and it was very clear that the only person who could have done this was Jeff. His theory was that Jeff had taken the family's shotgun out of its rack, used it to kill his father, stepmother and stepsisters, then he'd hid the gun and shells, washed his jeans, showered, got ready for prom and went to pick up Darla. However, the lack of evidence meant that Jeff wasn't prosecuted until 2002. The change being down to a politically motivated decision by the St. Joseph's County DA Christopher Toth rather than because of new evidence, of which there was none. By that time, Jeff had moved back to Florida, got married, had a child and was working as a consultant for IBM. His trial began in 2006, his defense deeming the prosecution's case ludicrous. As defense attorney Alan Baum put it, from all indications, the people that were with Jeff that night described him as just one of the group. They were having a good time. To think that he could spend that whole evening doing all the things they did and just having fun like kids do after murdering his family is preposterous. The jury took 3 hours to come to a unanimous decision, and when they finally did, it was to find Jeff Pelley guilty on all counts. The news magazine programme 2020 later gathered the jurors together to talk about the trial and the limited circumstantial case. Surprisingly, the police timeline wasn't what had caused them to reach a guilty verdict. One juror said that what stuck out for me was a picture of Reverend Bob Pelley, a photograph of his body laying in the house. The manner in which it was laying led me to believe that the shooter came out of Jeff's bedroom. Another photograph the jurors found significant was that of the gun rack in the parents' bedroom without a gun in it. Combined with Jeff's stepsister Jessica's testimony, it became critical because she remembered both a bow and a gun in the rack Friday night. Robert Jeffrey Pelley was sentenced to a total of 160 years in prison for the murders, 40 years for each victim. The sentence was later upheld by the Indiana Supreme Court in 2009. A few years later, however, Frances Watson of the McKinney Wrongful Conviction Clinic filed a motion for a post-conviction relief. Her basis for a retrial was the 1989 luminol test of Pelley's washing machine cylinder, which hadn't actually determined where there had been blood or even laundry detergent in the machine the day to prove that he'd tried to wash his bloodied clothes. She argued that the claim that Pelley had washed his jeans had therefore unjustly tainted jurors at his trial. Additionally, a curious transcript was never entered into evidence. In 2003, prosecutors had interviewed a woman named Toni Beeler, who spoke about Robert Pelley's shady financial dealings in Florida. She claimed that he was scared of being murdered by his yet unidentified clients. But further information regarding this claim and its validity remains elusive. Jeff Pelley is currently incarcerated at the Indiana State Prison. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that Jeff Pelley is innocent, as a lot of the evidence is circumstantial and there was nothing concrete to prove that Jeff Pelley was the person who committed the murders. But again, that doesn't mean he's also innocent either. What do you think? And please let me know what you think about this case and whether you believe Jeff Pelley is 100% guilty of the murders of his family or not. Thank you for watching and consider subscribing if you like true crime, but until I see you again, please be safe, be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.